All right. Are you guys ready for palette? Are you guys ready to talk about palette? Woo! Yeah! Palette. That's much better reaction than I was actually expecting, because leading up to this talk, I had two people message me separately asking if this was a joke. And they were like they couldn't understand that I'd be doing a palette talk in 2018. They were like, and maybe you're thinking like, what is this, October 2014? And did Android support library revision 24 just come out? I know what year it is. I know it's 2018. And I know that Palette's not the sexiest library or the newest thing or Kotlin whatever. But what I will say about Palette is that I've used it in every single one of my apps since it came out. And I think there's still some stuff that maybe you can learn from it. So, what is Palette, right? Palette is a support library that extracts prominent colors from images. So you throw a bitmap at it, and you throw this bitmap at it, this selfie, look at that, and then you get 6 color swatches there. You'll notice though that vibrant light isn't fetched. It looks white, it's not white, it just didn't return anything. Keep that in the back of your mind because it'll come up later. And the way that Palette does this is it analyzes the HSL color profile of the pixels in the image, and based on target ranges for luminance, saturation, and pixel population, it returns your color to you. And so like more vibrant image would be a more saturated image, a muted color would be a less saturated image, and then the light and dark are self-explanatory. And if you ever used Palette, I mean, you know the syntax typically, right? You're using like get vibrant color, you provide it with a default color, or you can fetch a swatch. If you fetch a swatch, give me null, you gotta check for that. But swatch gives you a bunch of other things, including the number of pixels, the HSL values, and then a body and title text that you can use to draw text over the color that swatch provides. And actually, I said there was 6 swatches, there's actually 7. This get dominant color, which despite Google not mentioning it in their documentation, is there, and what it does is it uses pixel population to return the dominant color, and you can see this in apps like good old Pocket Cast there, right? It uses it quite often in there. And so the way this is done is through targets. So vibrant, muted, and dominant are all predefined targets in Palette. And that's a custom selection of colors in a generated palette. And so, for example, you would supply it with the minimum, maximum, and target lightness, saturation, and then the average weight of lightness, saturation, and population is going to return you your color. And here's a target, right? Here's a custom target that you can create. You can see all the values that I'm setting there. I actually used this target in one of my apps. And I mean, you talk about HSL and everything and what that matters. I'll show you a side-by-side comparison of, have you guys heard of this app? It's called XDA Feed. And on the left is the Get Vibrant color using the stock Get Vibrant color from Palette. And you can see that it's a bit brighter, it's more saturated. And then the middle card, you can see it doesn't even get a swatch value for that. And then at the bottom, it's like a beige color instead of the more dominant blue. So on the left is just Get Vibrant. On the right is my custom target. And you can see with just a bit of tweaking how it can make a big difference in your app. And there's some things you got to watch out for. There's some gotchas with the custom filters with Palette. So by default, Palette won't return you a color that's very near black or white or like a red. And that's for colorblind related reasons for users that are colorblind. And this can prevent Palette from finding a swatch. So like you saw in that first selfie image there, that was a light, vibrant swatch that it was trying to return, and it may have been because of the filter there. And so here's how you can get around that, right? If you add the method clear filters to your palette builder, it'll actually get rid of those default filters that Google has put in there. And in this example also, you see there's 3 targets. One is using my custom target, and then the other is dark vibrant and light vibrant. And what that does is actually provides failover in Palette, where if you can't get a swatch out of that first target, it'll use other ones that you provided. Tip number 2, cache your palette results. In that other example I had, it was a list, right? If the user's going up and down, even if the images are cached, you don't want palette running over and over on those images, because swatch generation isn't free. It does take computing power to determine the color from those images, and depending on the size of your image or the size of the palette, that it can take longer that way. And pass while instantiating, that would be like if you have your list and then you're loading a details page and you're using, say, a vibrant color as an accent color for that, you just pass your details page the color that was returned by palette, and then you don't have to run it again for that. Tip number 3, fade and swatch colors. So the idea for this would be, say you have a details page that has a banner, and then you have a title, and what you want is you want the banner to load, and then you want to get your vibrant color or whatever from that banner to use as the color for your title. Well, what's the flow? Like the user just waits until the image loads off the internet, and then it gets the color, and then it just suddenly changes it. Like, you're not going to wait for that image to load and for palette to run. You need to show something right away. And so what you can do with this code is just provide it with a list of text views, and then it'll animate the color from, say, like a neutral gray or white up to the color that palette has returned for you. And here's an example. This loops, but you can see, and this is slowed down 5 times. Move the mouse out of the way. But you can see that in the background there of the title and the text, how it animates out from like a gray or a white to the color that it obtains from palette from that image. Tip number 4, manually adjust darkness and lightness. So the idea is that, like, say you have an image and then you have a title and you have a subtitle, and you're using palette to get your title. Instead of using, like, say, vibrant light or another target altogether for a second color, you could just use something like this, where you're manually adjusting the darkness of your color or lightness of your color, and that way you have your title and then you have a slightly darker color for your subtitle. You don't have to use palette for everything. You can use palette as a starting point and then adjust your color accordingly. And that's it. The point is to use palette to make your app stand out, right? It's been around for 3.5 years now. There's a reason why Google has increased the amount of colors you're kind of allowed to use now in Material Design 2. And I think that people that used palette early on were kind of ahead of the curve in some ways, because their apps were more colorful and they weren't just limited to those, like, Material Design 1.0 colors. Cache your palette results, especially if you're using them in lists. And then if you play around with targets, you can get some nice results. For example, if you want a pastel color, you would lower the saturation, increase the lightness of the target. And yeah, I think even in 2018, it may not be the sexiest or newest library, but there's some good stuff with palette. And that's it. Oh yeah. There's a pub night. Yeah, I didn't forget about it. So I'm sorry, Eric. There's a pub night on June 26th. That's a Tuesday. It's at Dundas Video. Go to the website or just Google Android Pub Night. It's the first result on Google. Last time we had 20 people. It was great. What's that, Steve?
Is that still the URL?
Yeah. Yeah. So what Steve's getting at is that there's a bunch of people who go to the pub night that don't drink. Like, quite a few. And so having pub night in the name kind of implies you have to drink. You don't. It's just a social thing. So even if you don't want to drink, it's super cool. There's pizza. It's a good time. Any questions about palette?
Maybe I missed it early on. I don't really understand what a target is. Can you explain
What a target is?
Yeah.
So basically you're telling palette the ranges and the preferred values of the saturation of the color that you want returned, as well as the lightness of the color you want returned. So you're basically saying, like, between 20% and 60% lightness, or between 10 and 90% saturation, and you can really, like, fine tune. So if you want a super saturated color, you can say between 0.5 and 0.8 saturation. And that way, and then what you can also do is specify the weight of your targets. You can say there's 3 weights. There's lightness, saturation, and pixel population, which is the number of pixels for the dominant color. And so you can basically use all those values to tailor the type of color that it returns to you.
So it's like you can filter against all the pixels.
Yes.
see which matches.
Exactly. It just influences the algorithm that chooses the color to return to you.
And that's why it might not find something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing, because
Fallbacks.
it really is no failover. If you say like between 70 and 80% saturation, it's a very narrow window, and you put a lot of weight behind saturation. It won't just go like, we couldn't find one. Let's just give them 50% saturation. It'll just straight up fail, and that's why you should add multiple targets, or make your values kind of wide, or just at the very least anticipate that it might not return a swatch, and that you need to handle that somehow.
At what point in developing your app should you think about adding palette versus using default colors?
I like in the UX design phase, I'd say, because unless you have, the thing is that you could have a branding, your brand could have certain colors that you need to use, but if your app is just using assets from all over the internet that you can't control, I think it's a really good way of kind of bringing color into the individual pages and making them really pop. Because, some of the best apps I use palette in really good ways. Like Pocket Cast is a really good example where they use it as the accent color in the background and all these different things. You can even do things like, say you get the vibrant color from an image, and then you desaturate your image so that it's all grayscale, and then you apply that vibrant color over top. Like, there's things you can do with color in general, but palette's just a really easy way of making consistent. And so that you have your banner, and then your accent color matches or complements your image in that way. So I'd say from the very beginning.
Have you experienced any performance problems while using Flex?
It's not. You definitely notice it if you use larger images. And with Palette, when you instantiate Palette, you can, or when you create the builder, you can specify the size of the palette that it generates. And they recommend, I think the default is like 16. I don't know the full range of the values, to be honest, but the default, it's like between 8 and 24, I think. Or maybe even 0 and 24. And they recommend, like the default 16, but they recommend like different values for like portrait photos versus landscapes and things like that. So it's very small, and it obviously depends on the device that you have for performance. But it's done asynchronously, and so that's why I think that like you can just, once you grab the color from Palette, just change your color. But like I showed in that example, animating it in, fading it in. Applying it that way and caching it so that, you can like prefetch images, right? Like if you're also using Palette when you prefetch your images, then that can help a lot too. So there's ways around the performance. Just don't do it like synchronously. Don't delay the load. If you're using like a shared transition, don't delay that transition for the response from Palette. And then you'll probably be fine. It's not that long. We good?
Do you have alternatives to Palette? That doesn't sound great,
What's
out there?
What do you got against Palette? No, I don't know. I looked up if there was Palette for other, if people had created Palette for other platforms, and there's like a JavaScript Palette. So people have like, I know this doesn't answer your Android question, but it's, I don't know, offhand I haven't seen anything that analyzes image. I mean, there's ways to do it manually, to look through the pixels and that kind of thing. It all depends on what your needs are, right? If you want, like Palette can do, basically all Palette does is just, it analyzes some very important metrics for finding colors, including like saturation, lightness, and dominance are...
Yeah, but then they're like different like image color spaces, right? So like it's only, or the example that you showed, it's only focusing on HSV or HSL.
HSL,
but
yeah.
then there are like so many different like color
Right.
spaces, so I'm wondering if...
I think, well, if say you wanted to use HSV instead of HSL, you'd have to do some sort of conversion to kind of get what you want, probably.
OpenCV, guys.
Yeah, I think as long as you can get it to HSL, because I think Android in general is like HSV, HSL across the board, but I'm not aware of anything offhand that would be similar or anything like that. All right, thanks. Oh, come to the pub night if you have any extra questions.